The day we moved into the blue house on Maple Hollow, I remember thinking this is the end of the road for a while, you know? No more barracks, no more temporary leases, just a yard that belongs to us and a mailbox with our name on it. But peace doesn't always come wrapped in a welcome mat, and some people treat small power like a weapon they keep sharpened just in case. My name's Ethan Cole, and we learned that the hard way. We were new me, my wife Maya, and the little girl who showed up sooner than expected, tiny and loud, and already bossing the living room. The neighborhood of Willow Ridge looked like a postcard: trimmed lawns, volunteer garden clubs, a vinyl white sign that read "Community Standards Pride in Our Homes." On paper it was friendly. In practice there was an office with a lock and a woman named Vivian Hale who treated that sign like a Bible and the rest of the neighborhood like parishioners she could chastise. At first, it was small things: a polite note left on our door about a non-compliant wind chime, a fine for unauthorized paint hue, because Maya had decided to paint the nursery a soft yellow the previous weekend. I mean, come on, a paint complaint. I laughed at it. Maya didn't. She'd get tight around the mouth, and I'd see that fear settle in her like an unwelcome house guest. People love to joke that the HOA is just about lawn ornaments and mailbox flags, but power tastes better when it's petty, and Vivian had gotten addicted. Vivian showed up at the block barbecue like a queen in a sun hat, waving a clipboard and smiling as if she were handing out awards. We tried to be polite. I offered her a beer. She declined and said, "We keep Willow Ridge respectable." Then she looked at our house the way someone reads a menu and decides what to order. "Wouldn't you consider selling?" she asked, casual as a weather report. When you refuse a request from someone like that, it's as if you've said no to a king. She smiled and made a mental note. By the time Maya went into labor, the notices had thickened into an envelope stack. Fines, warnings, a threat about further enforcement. The hypocrisy was the worst part. Vivian wore righteousness like armor while hiding the appetite for control underneath. My instinct was to document everything. I wired cameras to stream off-site. I stored copies in 3 places, and I started writing down names and dates like I was building a case. The birth was a bright, ridiculous sliver of joy in the middle of all that noise. There's nothing that clarifies priorities like having a newborn that needs you. And for a few breathless weeks we existed on naps and tiny socks and a fragile bubble of new parent ecstasy. Then that bubble popped. One dawn in late spring, someone banged on the door so hard the frames rattled. Maya was holding the baby. The house was still, the world waking up. Men in plain polos were in the yard. 2 of them wearing faces that read, "We're doing a job." They flashed badges that looked official enough to make your heart fall through your shoes. They had a piece of paper too, a court order stamped and signed, and a woman in the front, smug as a judge, who said, "We're here about a complaint." She wasn't wearing an HOA sash. She was wearing the kind of cold that comes with a plan. They reached for the baby before I could get my feet under me. You don't think quickly when someone's hand is on your child's blanket. You move instincts that never left from a life doing other people's tough work, and I moved. It wasn't cinematic. It was a scramble and a scream, and then a wall of bodies. I took a blow that knocked me sideways, and then another. I remember hitting the deck and thinking, this is happening in my house. I remember the baby crying and the sound of a man saying, "He's resisting." That word resisting was their script. They read it like it was written for them. They cuffed me based on signatures that looked right and seals that were polished, and they marched me out. Maya was frantic. Our neighbor Sam was on the porch, white as paper. Vivian watched from the edge of her yard like she was overseeing a play. Later, when I saw that court order up close, the ink bled in ways official ink shouldn't. Someone had forged authority and weaponized it with money and influence. For a brief, furious minute, it looked like we'd lost everything. The house, my freedom, the story they'd start telling about the dangerous father. But life and old contacts have a way of cutting through corrupt paper. A friend from my old unit, Nate, texted when he saw the news on his feed. Another, Captain Reyes, called in favors. We pulled together footage from the cameras, put the forged documents on a light box, and compared signatures. Vivian's smile got a lot less steady after that. For every step she took, we had a flash of it on a hard drive. Then the smear campaign began. Vivian's husband, a man with property portfolios in 3 states, funded press pieces and planted stories. The DA's office, which counts on referrals and donations, hesitated to rush in. Powerful people move in well-coordinated silence. We woke up in a public storm. I was a threat. Maya was hysterical. The baby was being used as a prop in a narrative that made money feel righteous. So we shifted. You don't beat a crooked small-town machine by shoving more paperwork at it. You choke off the machinery. Nate and I started tracing money. HOA accounts, shell companies, invoices for community improvements that oddly lined pockets. Sam, our neighbor who'd seemed like a nice retired schoolteacher, revealed he had a ledger, an old battered thing he kept hidden under his floorboards. He'd been used, he said, like many of them had kickbacks, favors, community donations that routed through a chain of friends and consultants until the checks ended up in places that had nothing to do with landscaping. Sam's voice broke when he confessed he'd covered for Vivian once, out of fear. I thought it was just bureaucracy, he said. I didn't know it was theft. We began to build a map of ties. Developers who wanted land for a new complex, county officials who'd turned a blind eye, donations that coincided with polite favors. When paper didn't show everything, we leaned on digital trails. Nate's crew, a quiet, brilliant wrecking ball that worked in shadows, found transaction patterns, offshore accounts, payments that matched invoices for consulting that didn't exist. It took patience and a little audacity, a staged settlement meeting, an invitation that smelled like closure, bait Vivian couldn't resist. On the day of the meeting, Vivian came with the whole cavalry, lawyers, a PR man, confidence to spare. She sat across from me and acted like I owed her something. I put Sam's ledger on the table. I asked one simple question aloud. Who gets the checks? She smiled, and that smile is a kind of confession when someone believes themselves untouchable. I pressed play on an audio clip. Nate had made a recorded conversation where a consultant named in the ledger admitted to routing payments. Vivian's composure slipped. She started to talk faster, the kind of small lies that unravel into contradictions. Words get heavy when they bend too many times. By then the FBI was on the other side of the glass, quiet men in suits who had been watching from offices that weren't local. They moved in clean and efficient, like an entirely different language of law. Vivian and her husband were handcuffed in the community center where they'd once given speeches about neighborhood values. The DA who'd sat on his hands got a call, and suddenly his calendar filled with subpoenas. The ledger that Sam had kept under a loose board turned out to be the hinge the whole thing swung on. The arrests didn't close all the wounds. Reputation is sticky. The smear left a residue. People I'd never met sent me messages about dangerous fathers and troubled neighbors. Maya had to rebuild trust with a community that respected a sign more than a neighbor's truth. We spent nights replaying the house breaking and the smell of dust and the way fear had settled in our bones. But there was a new thing too, a sense of ownership that wasn't just property, it was agency. We'd fought for our home, and in the process we'd pulled a thread that exposed a whole ragged sweater of corruption. When it was quiet, and it takes a long while to get to that quiet, we'd sit on the back steps and watch the yard grow back. The blue door still needed repainting. The financial mess still needed sorting. Not everyone wanted to believe their vote for respectability had been a vote for a con. But the kids on the block were playing again, and Sam planted roses in a strip of soil that used to be empty. If there's a moral here, it's not a neat one. Power gets small and mean when it doesn't get checked. People will accept little abuses if they come with a smile and a clipboard. They'll tell themselves it's for the common good. But when that smallness metastasizes into a machine, it needs to be named and stopped. You don't need to be a hero to push back. You need to be stubborn. You need friends. And you need the patience to document the truth until it becomes undeniable. I don't tell this to make anyone feel like they should be angry all the time. I tell it because small things add up, and because the people who scrub their hands clean of consequences tend to like the quiet where no one asks questions. If you ever find yourself the recipient of a suspicious notice, or a friendly neighbor who suddenly has the power to decide your fate, take a look under the hood. Keep receipts, keep cameras, and keep a ledger of human beings' names, dates, the little betrayals. Paper can be forged, but patterns are harder to fake. So tell me, what would you have done? Was I right to fight the way I did? Or should we have swallowed the fines and kept our heads down? Drop a comment and tell me which side you land on. Strict order that preserves the look of things, or messy justice that actually protects people. Share this with someone who lives under an HOA sign, and ask them if their neighborhood really feels like home. If you liked this story, hit subscribe and leave your thoughts, and if you've lived through something similar, tell us what happened. We could use the crowd's memory. Sometimes that's the one thing that keeps power honest.